Thanks for tuning in to Operation Revenge. Make sure to like the video and subscribe to the channel. Now let's begin the story.
Rebecca Ross had never been one for spectacle. The military had taught her that the quietest voices could hold the most weight. And as she walked into the grand ballroom, her polished boots clicking against the marble floors, she was the embodiment of that truth. At the front, towering flags and shining medals filled the room, but none of them had the weight of her presence. My name is Rebecca Ross. I'm 39 years old. I live in Washington, D.C., where I serve as a field marshal in the North Atlantic Joint Command, the highest-ranking female officer in the region. I was proud, of course, but I didn't wear it like a badge. I didn't need to. The room buzzed with anticipation. Dignitaries, military leaders, and prominent figures filled the space, their eyes locked on the podium at the front, where the recognition ceremony would soon begin. The lights reflected off polished floors, casting sharp shadows on the polished faces. But none of that could prepare me for the moment that came next. I approached the security gate, my invitation in hand, prepared for the polite checks that accompanied any high-profile gathering. But as I neared the entrance, the young guard stationed at the door paused. "Excuse me, ma'am," he said, his voice hesitant. "I'm afraid I don't see your name on the guest list." My heart didn't race. I didn't flinch. I merely showed him the card in my hand. I was invited. Rebecca Ross. His face flushed. He glanced down at the paper in his hands, then back at me, his uncertainty evident. "I'm sorry, ma'am," he stammered, "but I still don't see your name here." Before I could say another word, a senior officer appeared at my side. Colonel Harrow, his uniform as immaculate as always, gave the young man a pointed look, his jaw hardening. "Is there a problem, Lieutenant?" "No, sir." The guard immediately straightened, apologizing profusely as Harrow gave me a respectful nod. "Apologies for the confusion, General Ross," he said. "It's all cleared up now. You're more than welcome to enter." As I passed through the security checkpoint, I caught a glimpse of the colonel's puzzled expression. It wasn't often that someone in my position faced questions about their presence, but I was used to it. To doubt, to the occasional hesitation from those around me. I let it slide, as I always did. Inside the ballroom, the noise of conversation hummed, a gentle wave of chatter that faded as I took my seat in the front row, waiting for the ceremony to begin. I was used to being under the spotlight, expected to be the one to stand out, to deliver a speech, or to give an inspiring look. But today I noticed something missing. My family. They weren't there. Not my father. Not my mother. Not even Landon, my brother. They were always present for these types of events, always standing proudly in the background, their presence a quiet reminder of the weight of family legacy. But not today. I couldn't help but feel a strange pang of emptiness. I had expected them to be here, at least for a moment. Even after all these years, some part of me still hoped they'd show up to support me. The lights dimmed, and the commander took the stage, his voice commanding attention as he began his speech. But all I could think about in that moment was how, for the first time in a long time, the absence of my family felt like a presence I couldn't ignore. "The woman we honor tonight," he continued, his voice rising, "is a testament to what it means to lead with integrity, to serve with honor, and to carry the weight of responsibility with unyielding strength. We are proud to recognize Field Marshal Rebecca Ross, the highest-ranking female officer in the North Atlantic Joint Command." The room erupted into applause. I stood, my movements precise and measured. The weight of their gazes, the mixed admiration and curiosity, was nothing new. But this moment, it was mine. And for the first time, it was mine alone. The spotlight shifted to me, and I felt the soft weight of the moment. This was the culmination of years of sacrifice, years of quiet determination. The stage was set for a new chapter, and as I walked toward the front to receive my recognition, I felt a quiet sense of reclaiming something that had long been denied. Growing up in the Ross family wasn't exactly the kind of experience that nurtured warmth or affection. My father, Admiral Gregory Ross, ran his household like a naval operation, precise, unforgiving, and always under the microscope. Every decision, every failure, every victory was weighed and measured against the expectations of the man who never once made me feel like I measured up. My mother, Anne, was the quieter counterpart, a woman who could orchestrate the most elaborate family gatherings with the precision of a military strategist, but who, like my father, held expectations higher than the sky. I couldn't even remember a time when I hadn't been compared to my brother, Landon, the golden boy, the one with the perfect grades, the impeccable social graces, the charm that seemed to effortlessly win the approval of everyone he met. He was the son that our father had always dreamed of, and I was merely the backup, the afterthought, the one who quietly worked behind the scenes, hoping that maybe, just maybe, I'd earn a glance of approval. I was often sidelined in family photos, tucked away behind Landon's beaming face. In the background of every achievement our family celebrated, Landon's name was always at the forefront. I learned early on that the best I could hope for was to remain unnoticed. But even the smallest rebellion can set off a spark, and that's exactly what happened when I made the decision to forge my own path. The day I chose Army Intelligence over the Naval Academy was the first time I truly felt like I was breaking free. My father's reaction wasn't exactly what I had hoped for. "Rebecca, you're throwing away everything we've worked for. Everything I've taught you," he said, the words as cold as they were final. I remember standing there, looking at him, knowing that no matter how many awards I earned, no matter how high I climbed, nothing would ever be enough for him. Nothing would ever matter as much as what Landon did or how much attention he got for it. So I chose a path that would keep me out of the spotlight. Army Intelligence was far from glamorous. It was quiet, tactical. I worked behind the scenes, planning operations, analyzing data, working with people who didn't care about flashy titles or familial legacy. In that world, I thrived. But I quickly learned that success in silence came at a price. My family never understood it. They never acknowledged it. It was as if I didn't exist unless they needed me to step up and do something that was crucial. "Landon's going to be a general one day," my father would boast at family dinners. "He's got the drive, the vision." And there I was in the background again. My name barely a whisper. My achievements brushed off as good enough or just another job well done. In our family, it wasn't about the work you did. It was about how visible it was. How many people saw you, how many people praised you. I was invisible, and I had come to accept it. But somewhere, deep inside, a quiet fire began to burn. I wasn't going to fight for my place in their world. I was going to create my own. And for the first time, the quiet, invisible work I did started to matter to me, not to anyone else. The countless hours spent working on covert operations, ensuring that our military intelligence could stay one step ahead, it was my victory, even if no one ever recognized it. And yet, no matter how much I achieved, how much I contributed, Landon's name always seemed to eclipse mine. My father would call me to discuss my work, but the conversation would always circle back to Landon's latest promotion or his growing influence in the military. The anger, the resentment, and the exhaustion slowly built up inside me. I had spent years of my life living in the shadows, playing the role of the dutiful daughter, the invisible soldier, and I had grown tired. It wasn't about my father's approval anymore. It was about me taking what was mine, taking it without apologies, without waiting for permission. But that moment had not yet come. Not yet. I could feel the change stirring within me, deep down, like a storm waiting to break. And though I kept playing the part of the dutiful daughter, I began to quietly prepare myself for the inevitable day when I would finally rise above the weight of their expectations. In the meantime, I remained the person they wanted me to be. Quiet, reserved, always out of the spotlight. But I knew, in the back of my mind, that I was no longer willing to let that role define me forever. The mission in Mumbai was supposed to be the culmination of my career in Army Intelligence. It was a high-stakes operation, international implications, political tensions, the kind of operation that could make or break entire alliances, the kind of mission that defined legacies. And yet, somehow, the people who mattered most, the ones who should have been standing with me, acknowledging my work, were the very ones erasing me from the narrative. I had led the operation from the ground up, pulling the strings behind the scenes, managing every intricate detail. Intelligence was a delicate dance. It was about seeing things that others couldn't, predicting outcomes before they even happened, navigating the murky waters of diplomacy, espionage, and covert operations. I was good at it, and I knew I had done my job flawlessly. Yet, when the mission succeeded, when the crisis was averted, when the international backlash was avoided, I wasn't the one who received the accolades. The announcement came just hours after the operation concluded. I stood in the briefing room, my colleagues congratulating each other, exchanging pleasantries, talking about the success we had all contributed to. But somehow, amidst the chatter, my name was never mentioned. Instead, it was Captain Drew High, a colleague who had been there in a supportive capacity, whose presence had been more ceremonial than critical, who was thrust into the spotlight. It was Drew who was lauded for his leadership. Drew who received the official commendation, Drew who was presented with accolades in front of the world. I knew even then that something was wrong. It wasn't just a slight, it was systematic erasure. I filed my complaint with the internal military hierarchy. I outlined my role, my contributions, the hours I had worked, the decisions I had made. I had been the architect of this operation, and yet my name had been left out of the official reports. It felt like a betrayal, but I didn't expect anything less. I had seen this happen before to others, especially to women like me, to those who worked quietly behind the scenes, who didn't demand the spotlight but simply did the work. What I didn't expect was how quickly the military dismissed my complaint. My superiors, a handful of male officers, most of them older and more seasoned than I, brushed it aside. "Rebecca, we're grateful for your contributions," one of them said. "But Captain High was the public face of this operation. We'll make sure to include you in the internal reports, but that's where it ends." I was seething, my hands clenched into fists beneath the table, but I didn't speak. What good would it do? I had learned, over the years, that my silence was more powerful than any words I could say. And right now, the only thing I could do was continue to serve, to perform the work no one else could see. But my anger burned inside me, hotter and deeper than I had ever allowed it to before. It wasn't the first time I had been overlooked, but it was the first time that I realized how deeply this system undervalued me, how my efforts were only as valuable as the recognition they could receive. The military didn't care about results. They cared about faces, names, and titles. They cared about the story, not the substance. I could feel it inside me, this slow, simmering fury that had been building for years. Each slight, each whisper of doubt, each moment of being pushed aside. It all coalesced in that meeting room. I wasn't just angry that I had been erased. I was angry that I had allowed myself to be ignored for so long, but I was done being overlooked. As I left the meeting, my mind began to race, processing everything that had happened. The words they had used to dismiss me, the empty promises of recognition that would never come. I knew then that this was just another battle in a much larger war, and this time I wasn't going to lose quietly. I began collecting evidence, copies of reports, emails, internal messages, anything I could get my hands on. It was all I could do in the moment. I knew that I couldn't fight the system head-on, not yet, but I could start by collecting the tools to expose the truth. I had learned over the years how to operate in the shadows, how to work behind the scenes, and get things done. But now, I was going to make sure my voice was heard. The anger was no longer something I could swallow. It was no longer something I could let slide. The military had stolen my voice, stolen my recognition, and it was time I took it back. In the quiet of my office, with only the hum of the overhead lights for company, I made a vow to myself that I would not let this go. I would not be erased again. I didn't have to wait long. The evidence I needed was right in front of me. In the following weeks after the Mumbai operation, I stayed busy, keeping my head down and making sure everything on my plate was handled. But behind the scenes, I was methodical, collecting every shred of documentation I could find about the operation, the reports, the emails, even the subtle acknowledgments that had been buried. It was all there, buried in the details, the key pieces to dismantle the lie that had been so carefully constructed. Then came the moment I had been waiting for, a breakthrough. Emily Keller, an old colleague from my days in the intelligence division, reached out with a simple text. "I have something you need." Emily had always been a sharp operator, and more importantly, she was someone I trusted. We had worked on numerous covert operations together, and while we had both gone our separate ways over the years, our paths had crossed often enough that I knew she'd never fail me. I met her at a quiet cafe on the outskirts of DC, the kind of place where you could have a conversation without worrying about who might be listening. I sat at a corner table, my back to the wall, watching the entrance carefully, waiting for her to arrive. When Emily walked in, I immediately saw the folder in her hand. The look on her face told me everything I needed to know. The evidence was in that folder. She slid into the seat across from me, eyes scanning the room before she finally let out a breath, her shoulders dropping as if a weight had been lifted. "I found it," she said, her voice low. "It's all here." I didn't ask what it was. I didn't need to. I opened the folder immediately, flipping through the pages with a growing sense of disbelief. Inside were official documents, operational logs, and something far more damning. A signed log showing that Landon, my brother, had authorized the removal of my name from the official records of the Mumbai operation. The reality hit me like a ton of bricks. Not only had I been erased from history, but Landon had orchestrated it. It wasn't an oversight, it wasn't an accident, it was deliberate, calculated. He had been the one to ensure my contributions were buried, and now I had the proof. I didn't speak for a moment, just stared at the documents, my pulse pounding in my ears. Emily leaned forward, her voice barely above a whisper. I didn't think he would go this far. I knew he wasn't thrilled with your success, but this is sabotage. I never thought he would do this, I finally muttered, the words coming out in a stunned rush. My throat tightened. He's always been the golden boy, but I never imagined he'd actively work to pull me down. Emily's eyes were sympathetic, but there was a fire behind them. This is big. You need to take him down, Rebecca. You have to. This is beyond what's normal. It's personal. I nodded slowly, a sense of purpose filling the space where disbelief had been moments before. I wasn't just fighting for recognition anymore. I was fighting for something much deeper. My career, my integrity, my family's twisted manipulation of me. I'll handle it, I said, the words coming out sharper than I expected. But not yet. We need more. I want to make sure he's exposed completely. I'm not just going to walk in and demand accountability. I need to destroy everything he's built. I need to do it right. Emily nodded, understanding what I meant. She knew how these things worked in the system. Patience was key, and I had learned the art of quiet strategy well. I wasn't going to make the same mistake I'd made in the past, reacting too quickly, too rashly. This time, I would be methodical. Every piece of evidence would be backed up, every move calculated. I'll send over everything I have, Emily said, standing to leave. Just let me know when you need me. You've done more than enough, I replied, watching her walk away. She paused for a moment, meeting my gaze one last time. Her eyes were full of understanding. This wasn't just a job for me anymore. This was something far more personal. I was done being invisible, done being erased, done being treated like I was nothing more than a footnote in the narrative of my own life. With the evidence in my hands, I knew the next step was crucial. I had to expose Landon for what he was, and I would. But I also knew that the road ahead wouldn't be easy. There would be more moves to make, more pieces to uncover. But I was ready. I was ready to take control of the story. And this time, I wouldn't let anyone rewrite it for me. The cabin was silent when I arrived, isolated, remote, tucked away from the world. It was the perfect place for reflection. It was also the perfect place to plan my next move. I had always found peace in solitude. It was there, in the quiet, that I could think clearly, away from distractions and the weight of the military structure that had consumed so much of my life. The noise, the endless meetings, the people who always had opinions about what I should do, how I should act, it had all gotten to be too much. Now, it was just me, the stillness of the woods, and the documents I'd gathered. I unpacked everything from my briefcase, logs, contracts, emails, all of it. A quiet revolution needed a strategy, and I had no intention of letting anyone stop me. The cold air outside filled the cabin as I opened a window and settled into a chair by the small wood-burning stove. The heat from the fire flickered against the walls, casting long shadows that felt like the ghosts of my past. The years I spent quietly watching my work be ignored. The years I spent in the shadow of my family's expectations. I knew I couldn't act on impulse. I needed to study everything, every document, every date, every detail. If I was going to bring down Landon and make sure no one could ever erase me again, I had to be methodical. I needed facts. And I needed to make sure every piece of the puzzle fit together perfectly. The hours passed in a blur as I combed through everything. I dug deep into the military's bureaucratic systems, the logs of operation results, memos that had been sent out. And with each piece I uncovered, the web of lies surrounding my brother became clearer. His influence, the way he twisted the narrative of my career to fit his own, none of it was an accident. Every move, every word had been calculated to keep me beneath him. But I wasn't just fighting him now. I was fighting the system that had allowed this to happen. It wasn't enough to just expose Landon's betrayal. I had to take down the structure that supported him, the ones who allowed him to climb over me and others like me. This was about justice, yes, but also about reshaping everything I had been forced to live under for so long. As I continued to study the files, one thing became clear. The military wasn't going to change on its own. It was up to me to force that change, and I couldn't afford to fail. I had to take everything they had done to me, every slight, every omission, and turn it into a weapon that could tear through the walls they had built around themselves. The next morning, I woke early, the sun barely breaking through the trees. I had already compiled a report that outlined everything, every document, every proof, and every piece of evidence. The first step was clear. I needed to start gathering allies. I couldn't do this alone. But it was equally important that I chose the right people. I reached out to Major Talia Monroe, an old mentor who had always been on my side. She had left the military system a few years ago, disillusioned by the same things that had nearly broken me. I trusted her, and I needed someone who knew the inner workings of the military bureaucracy to help me navigate what was to come. The conversation was brief, but I could hear the surprise in her voice when she agreed to meet. She had never been one for politics or games, and this time, neither was I. "Rebecca, you know I've got your back," she said on the phone, her voice calm but serious. "But if we do this, there's no turning back. You'll be in the crosshairs, and there's no telling how far they'll go to protect him." "I know," I replied. "But it's time. He's been stealing from me for years, and I'm not going to let him get away with it anymore." "I'll be there," Talia said. "Let's talk through it." I hung up the phone and took a long, deep breath. The quiet had done its job. I was ready. I had the proof. I had the strategy. I wasn't just about to take back what was mine. I was going to rewrite the rules. The next few weeks were a blur of strategy. I filed the official complaints, submitting every piece of evidence I had gathered. I knew the risks. This wasn't just about exposing Landon. It was about taking on the entire system. If I wasn't careful, it could all backfire. So I moved slowly, meticulously. Every piece of evidence was backed up by more evidence. I contacted others who had been wronged by the military's bureaucratic system, people who had been pushed aside, erased, ignored. They too had a story to tell. Slowly, the pieces came together. It wasn't just about Landon anymore. It was about the system that allowed him to flourish by crushing everyone else in his path. As the days wore on, my plan took shape. I wasn't just going to expose him in front of a few officers or in a quiet meeting. No, this was going to be public. The truth would be undeniable, and it would shatter the carefully constructed image that Landon had spent his life building. He had been stealing my future, but I was going to steal his. And when the day came, when the documents were filed, when the evidence was presented, I would be standing tall, not just as a field marshal, but as the woman who took back everything that had been stolen from her. The fire inside me burned brighter than it ever had before. The quiet had given me strength, and now that quiet power was going to be unleashed. The phone call came at exactly 9:17 a.m., the timing almost cruel in its precision. I had been sitting at the kitchen table of the cabin, staring out at the forest, trying to silence the relentless thoughts running through my mind. My plan was set in motion, the documents filed, the evidence compiled. But there was one final piece I needed to complete the puzzle, and Emily Keller had just delivered it. "Rebecca, I've got it," she said, her voice steady but urgent. "I just got off the phone with a contact of mine in the legal division. I have a recording. It's from Landon himself." My stomach dropped, a feeling I hadn't anticipated creeping up my spine. I had been preparing for this moment for months, but now, hearing those words, I felt the gravity of what was about to unfold. "A recording?" I repeated, my mind racing. "What's on it?" "You're not going to believe it," Emily said. "It's Landon talking to someone, arranging for you to take the fall for a botched mission. He's setting you up to be blamed for a failure that never even happened." I stood up abruptly, pacing around the small cabin as the weight of her words sank in. "He's going to throw me under the bus?" I asked, though I knew the answer. "For what?" "To protect his own reputation." Emily's voice dropped to a whisper, as if she were afraid someone might be listening. "That's exactly what he's doing. And it's not just about the mission. This goes deeper, Rebecca. He's been orchestrating things for years, making sure that your name is erased from everything. And now, he's trying to make sure you're blamed for something you didn't even do." The bile in my throat rose as my thoughts scattered. Landon had always been the golden child, the one my father adored, the one who could do no wrong. But this was something I couldn't ignore. He had taken my career, my achievements, and manipulated them to secure his own place at the top. And now he was using me as a scapegoat, as if I was nothing more than a pawn to protect his precious image. "Where did you get the recording?" I asked, trying to steady my breath. "There's a legal loophole. One of my contacts had access to the transcript," Emily explained. "But the recording is solid. I've already sent it to you, every word. You need to hear it for yourself. You need to have it ready when you confront him." I grabbed my phone from the table, my hands shaking as I unlocked the screen. Sure enough, Emily had sent me an audio file. My thumb hovered over the play button, but I hesitated for a moment. This was it. The final piece. the proof I needed to take him down. Rebecca? Emily's voice came through the phone again, softer now. This is bigger than just you and him. This is about everyone he's used and discarded to climb the ladder. This is your chance to expose everything, every single person who's been silenced. I swallowed hard, nodding even though I knew Emily couldn't see me. She was right. This wasn't just about Landon. It was about every woman and every person who had been pushed aside because of his charm, his lies, and his manipulation. It was time to put an end to it. I pressed play. The voice on the recording was unmistakable. Landon's smooth tone, calm and calculated. Yeah, make sure she's the one who gets blamed for the failure in Mumbai, he said, his words dripping with venom. She's the one who'll take the fall. I've already set it up with the higher-ups. It's perfect. She's worked in the shadows long enough. Time to let her step out of them, right into the fire. I felt my heart race as I listened, every word a punch to my gut. He was so casual, so cold, as he outlined how he planned to frame me, how he was going to use my reputation, my work, my sacrifice, and twist it to suit his needs. I'm not letting her ruin this, Landon continued. I've worked too hard to get to where I am, and I won't let her destroy everything I've built. She doesn't deserve any recognition, and if I have to make her disappear to protect my career, then that's what I'll do. The recording ended with a sharp click, and for a moment, everything was still. My phone slipped from my hand, falling to the floor with a dull thud. My mind raced as I tried to process what I had just heard. He didn't just want to erase me, he wanted to destroy me. I breathed deeply, picking up my phone and staring at the screen, the reality of what I had just uncovered slowly sinking in. This wasn't just about me being overlooked. This was personal. This was about a man who would do anything to protect himself, no matter the cost. The fire inside me, the one I had been holding back for so long, roared to life. I wasn't going to let him get away with this. Not anymore. I opened the folder on my desk, the one I had spent weeks preparing. The evidence, the documents, everything was there. I had what I needed to take him down, to expose him for the liar and manipulator he was. But I couldn't do it yet. Not until I had everything locked in place. I reached out to Talia Monroe, my old mentor, and laid out the plan. I wasn't going to just expose Landon's betrayal. I was going to bring down the entire structure that had supported him. It was time to dismantle the system that had kept me in the shadows for so long. This wasn't just about revenge, it was about justice. And it was time for me to take back what had been stolen from me. Not through rage, but through strategy, through proof, and through the quiet strength I had learned to harness over the years. The time for silence was over, and now it was my turn to make sure my story was heard. The tribunal room was cold, sterile, and impersonal, much like the system I had spent so many years serving. I sat at one end of the long table, my hands folded neatly in front of me. Across from me sat a panel of high-ranking officers, their eyes trained on the evidence in front of them. Landon wasn't here yet, and I almost relished the quiet before the storm. Major Talia Monroe, sitting beside me, gave me a quiet nod of support, her presence a reminder that I wasn't doing this alone. For the first time in years, I felt like I had allies, people who weren't just watching me burn from the sidelines, but who were actively helping me take back my power. You're sure about all of this? Talia asked, her voice low, though she didn't need to worry about being overheard. This is bigger than we thought. Exposing Landon and Captain High could bring a lot of attention, and not all of it will be positive. I took a deep breath and met her gaze. I've thought about nothing else for weeks, I replied. This isn't just about Landon. It's about the entire structure, the system that's allowed men like him to destroy careers, erase women like me from the history we deserve. I'm ready. Talia didn't respond at first, but the way her lips tightened told me she understood. She had seen the toll this kind of battle took on people. She knew I wasn't just fighting for my career anymore. I was fighting to make sure no one else would be erased the way I had been. The room was quiet for another long stretch, the faint hum of the ventilation system the only sound. I kept my focus on the panel in front of me, Colonel Harrow, the same officer who had dismissed my concerns at the beginning of this mess, and two others whose faces I recognized from my years of service but had never truly known. Then, the doors opened, and Landon walked in, his perfectly tailored uniform looking as immaculate as ever, a stark contrast to the fire burning inside me. He glanced at me, and for a brief moment, I saw that familiar flicker of disdain in his eyes. To him, I was nothing but an obstacle, someone who had dared to steal his spotlight. I didn't flinch. I didn't move. He took his seat at the opposite end of the table, Across from me, with a calm demeanor that only served to mask the arrogance behind his eyes, Landon had always been the golden child, the one who never had to work for anything because everything had been handed to him. He had always thought he was untouchable, but today that would change. The panel leader, Colonel Harrow, cleared his throat, his tone professional, but I could hear the subtle shift in his voice when he spoke to Landon. "Captain Ross," he began, his eyes darting briefly to me before turning back to him. "We're here today to address some serious allegations brought against you. You've been accused of intentionally misrepresenting the role of Field Marshal Rebecca Ross in Operation Mumbai. This includes accusations of falsifying official reports and obstructing her rightful recognition." Landon leaned forward, his calm expression never wavering. "I'm sure there's been some misunderstanding," he said smoothly. "I've been nothing but supportive of Rebecca's career. She's my sister, and I've always wanted what's best for her." I could feel the lie hanging in the air like smoke, thick and suffocating. It was the same line he had used for years. "I've always wanted what's best for you, Rebecca." But the truth was, he didn't care about what was best for me. He cared about his own advancement, and if he had to destroy me to get ahead, he would do it with a smile on his face. The panel turned their attention to me, and I could feel their eyes weighing my every word. This was it. This was where I needed to make my case. Not just for my career, but for every person who had ever been ignored or silenced in the name of ambition. "I've submitted evidence," I said calmly, my voice unwavering, "not just of my role in the operation, but of a systemic effort to remove my name from official reports, to erase my contribution. This wasn't just an accident. This was deliberate." I placed the folder in front of me, sliding it toward the panel. Talia picked up the first page and began reading aloud. I could see the looks of surprise pass over their faces as they read through the documents, the emails, the operational logs where Landon's signature appeared as the one to remove my name from the official commendations. He had been involved in a direct effort to ensure my work was hidden, not just from the public, but from my own colleagues and superiors. "You can't be serious," Landon said, his voice rising now, the calm facade cracking for the first time. "Rebecca, this is ridiculous. You're accusing me of sabotaging you? Of all the things—" I interrupted him, my voice steady, louder now. "You're the one who has sabotaged me, Landon. You've used your influence to erase my name from the history of this mission. You've made sure I'd never receive the recognition I deserved because it didn't suit your plans. You're so consumed by your own ambition that you'll throw anyone under the bus to make sure you come out on top." Landon's jaw tightened, and for a moment, I saw something flash in his eyes, a flicker of panic, followed by cold defiance. He wasn't used to being challenged, and now that I had exposed the truth, the walls he had so carefully built were starting to crumble. The panel was silent for a moment, reading through the evidence I had provided. The weight of the moment settled in the room, thick and heavy. I could feel Landon's fury, the way he wanted to lash out, but he knew he was caught. Then Colonel Harrow spoke again, his voice colder now. "Captain Ross, we have corroborating evidence of your actions, and it's clear that you violated the trust placed in you. This tribunal will take a recess to deliberate further on your actions. In the meantime, I suggest you prepare for the consequences." Landon opened his mouth to argue, but Harrow held up a hand. "This conversation is over. We will reconvene in 30 minutes. I didn't speak again as the room emptied, the tension between us palpable. Landon's eyes followed me as I stood, but I didn't look back. I had already won. This wasn't about proving myself to him. It was about proving to myself that I was no longer afraid to stand up to him, to anyone. As I walked out of the room, Talia by my side, I could feel the shift. It was like the weight of 1,000 burdens had been lifted off my shoulders. I wasn't just Rebecca Ross anymore. I was a force to be reckoned with. And for the first time, I felt like I had finally reclaimed my place. The public ceremony to announce the findings of the tribunal was scheduled for that evening. There was an air of tense anticipation, and as I stood backstage, listening to the hum of conversations filtering in from the audience, I felt something different. The usual knot of nerves in my stomach was absent. Today was not about fighting for recognition. It was about reclaiming control over my story. I had done the work. Now it was time to take my place. The voices behind the curtains grew louder, the crowd's chatter building until the moment I knew was coming. The doors opened, and I stepped onto the stage. The spotlight was blinding for a moment, but I didn't flinch. I was ready. I didn't seek the applause, the cheers, or the admiration. All I needed was the truth that would be laid out before everyone. the culmination of my years of work, sacrifice, and silence. Now, it would be seen. The commander at the podium cleared his throat as he began to speak, his voice amplified in the large hall. Ladies and gentlemen, today we stand at a pivotal moment in our history. The North Atlantic Joint Command has always prided itself on its commitment to integrity, to the values that bind us as a force. And today, we address the consequences of betrayal within our own ranks. I could see Landon in the front row, his back straight, his hands clasped tightly in front of him. His expression was unreadable, but I knew. I knew he was trying to keep his composure, trying to project an air of confidence, but the cold sweat on his brow betrayed him. The lies he had so carefully constructed were unraveling. Field Marshal Rebecca Ross, the commander continued, has shown unwavering dedication to the service of this country and its people. She has worked tirelessly in the shadows, never seeking the recognition she deserved, but always putting the mission first. The actions of Captain Landon Ross and Captain Drew High, which sought to undermine her contributions and erase her from the official record, have been brought to light. And as such, we take full responsibility for allowing such betrayal to persist. The room grew silent. Every eye in the audience was on me. The moment had arrived, and for once I didn't feel the weight of their expectations. I was free. The tribunal has concluded that Captain Landon Ross's actions have been a clear violation of military ethics. He will be stripped of his rank and removed from active duty, the commander declared. A wave of gasps rippled through the crowd, but I didn't feel satisfaction. Not yet. This wasn't just about punishing Landon. This was about something bigger. The commander's gaze shifted to me. We are proud to restore Field Marshal Rebecca Ross's rightful place within the North Atlantic Joint Command. Her service, her integrity, and her dedication to the values we hold dear have been recognized and will be honored. The applause erupted, louder than I expected, but it didn't matter. The recognition wasn't what I was after. The truth was what mattered. The truth had been heard, and I had finally taken my place. But there was still one final confrontation, one final piece of unfinished business. I turned toward the side of the stage, where Landon was still seated, his face pale now. As I descended the steps, I felt a calm resolve settle within me. I wasn't going to let him walk away from this without hearing the truth. I approached him slowly, every step measured, my eyes never leaving his. He looked up at me, and for the first time, I saw the uncertainty in his eyes, the cracks in the perfect image he had spent years building. "Rebecca," he said, his voice strained. I didn't let him finish. "You chose to erase me," I said, my voice low and steady. "You chose to use me, to tear me down, to make sure I never got the recognition I deserved. You did that, not just to me, but to everyone who ever believed in me. But now you're the one who's been exposed." Landon's face twisted with anger. "You don't understand." "No, you don't understand," I interrupted, my voice firm. "You thought you could manipulate everything, but you're not untouchable, and you never were. All of this," I gestured to the room around us. "This was never about family for you. It was about control. It was about protecting your fragile ego. But it's over now. You're done." His expression faltered for a moment, and I saw the mask crack just slightly, revealing the fear behind it. He stood, trying to compose himself, but I could see his hands trembling. "You don't get to do this, Rebecca. You don't get to destroy me like this." "I'm not destroying you," I said, my voice quieter now, but filled with finality. "I'm simply taking back what's mine. The truth isn't destruction, Landon. It's freedom." He opened his mouth to respond, but no words came out. I turned away from him, walking back toward the stage as the applause continued to echo in my ears. But this time, it wasn't for him. It was for me, and I didn't look back. I didn't need to. The battle had been won. And as I stood in the spotlight, facing the future I had reclaimed, I knew that for the first time in my life, I had finally earned my place. Not as someone's daughter, not as someone's sister, but as Rebecca Ross, Field Marshal of the North Atlantic Joint Command. And that was all I needed. The reception was in full swing, but I didn't stay long. The speeches had been made, the commendations handed out, and the applause was still echoing in my ears as I made my way through the crowd, away from the formalities. I could feel the weight of the moment lifting from my shoulders, but instead of relief, there was a quiet emptiness that settled in. This wasn't the celebration I had imagined. I had finally achieved everything I had fought for, my rank restored, the recognition earned, my career acknowledged. Yet, as I looked around the room at the smiling faces, the perfectly polished uniforms, the familiar figures of my colleagues and military superiors, I realized that none of this mattered. Not in the way I had hoped. Not in the way I had imagined in my younger years, when I thought all I needed was to be seen by them, to have them acknowledge my worth. As I walked through the room, the clinking of glasses, the soft murmur of conversations, and the fluttering of military flags all seemed distant. I wasn't part of this world anymore, not in the way they wanted me to be. But that was okay. I didn't need their approval anymore. I had fought for my place, and now I was taking it, but on my own terms. As I reached the door to step outside, a young officer approached me. He was wearing the standard dress uniform, his face slightly flushed with excitement, as if meeting me was something of an honor. He was probably fresh out of training, eager to make an impression. "Field Marshal Ross?" he said, his voice a bit shaky but full of admiration. "I just wanted to say, you're an inspiration. I've been following your career for years. It's because of you that I joined. You showed me that someone like me, someone who wants to work hard, stay in the background, can make a real difference." I paused for a moment, taking in his words. This was the kind of recognition I had always wanted. Not from the top brass. Not from my family, who had always been too busy to care, but from someone who truly understood the quiet strength it took to get where I was. I nodded, offering him a small smile. "Thank you. But remember, the work doesn't stop here. You're just getting started. What matters is that you stay true to who you are. Don't let anyone make you feel like you're not enough, no matter what title they give you." He smiled, the gratitude in his eyes clear. "Thank you, ma'am. I'll keep that in mind." I gave him a quick nod and turned to leave. The door opened with a soft creak, the cool evening air hitting me like a refreshing wave. As I stepped out into the night, I could feel the tension in my chest finally release. The quiet had returned, but it was different now. It wasn't a silence born from waiting to be seen. It was the peace of someone who had taken their place and no longer needed validation from others. I walked to my car, the sounds of the reception fading behind me. The moment I got in, I sat for a second, my fingers on the steering wheel, letting the silence wrap around me. There were no cameras here, no flashing lights or formal speeches. It was just me. The truth was, I didn't need the recognition anymore. I had built my own path, and I had taken it. I had come to understand that my strength wasn't in the accolades or the applause, but in the quiet determination that had always been there, even when no one saw me. As I drove away from the ceremony, I knew this was the beginning of something different. I wasn't walking away from my career. I was walking into a new chapter. A chapter where I didn't have to fight for a place anymore. I had already claimed it. There was no fanfare, no grand celebration. But as the headlights cut through the darkness on the road ahead, I knew this was exactly where I was meant to be. I was no longer just the silent soldier in the shadows. I had taken my place. And that was enough.